Today's webinar is entitled 5 Secrets of Public Speaking. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Our presenter is an RIT alumnus, Rashad Bayramov. Rashad earned his MS in Liberal Arts from RIT in 2003 and joins us today from Baku, Azerbaijan. Rashad is a corporate communications, public speaking, and personal development specialist. Rashad holds an MS in Communications and Marketing from RIT, and a Master's of Arts in Philosophy from Azerbaijan University of Languages. As a consultant, Rashad's key clients include British Petroleum, State Oil Company of Azerbaijan, Kazakh Telecom, Qatar Gas, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Pasha Holding, and Azerbaijani government, and many more prestigious entities besides. He was working with individuals working in high-level government offices, including senior diplomats and public figures. Rashad has experience across corporate communications as a chief editor of Corporate Magazine, a head of employee programs, a press officer, a crisis communications expert, and as a web writer. As British Petroleum's Government Affairs Manager, he serves as the company's spokesperson for audiences ranging from new recruits to head of government, including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and former President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso. He is the author of several articles on public speaking and corporate communication, including the book, Trust Your Words, 10 Steps to Conquer Your Audience, which was published in December of 2016. Rashad has designed several training programs since 2012. His most popular programs include The 5 Secrets of Public Speaking, Effective Business Communication, How to Understand and Be Understood, and Time Management for a Happy Life. Rashad, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
Thank you very much, Erin. Thank you, guys, and I welcome all of the participants of this webinar. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to talk to you about something which I've been passionate for many years now. So I help people fight their fear of public speaking and make impressive speeches. Now, today I'm going to speak to you about the 5 golden rules of public speaking. And I think if you really understand and follow them, you will be able to control your anxiety and deliver amazing presentations whenever, wherever. In fact, if you've already joined this call, to me that speaks clearly of the fact that you understand how important public speaking is for your career. And frankly, not only career, but general success in life. But did you know that research shows that most adults will actually stop listening to your speech within the first 10 minutes, unless they're convinced that there's something useful in the speech for them. Now, trouble is that most people don't know some basic tips, basic, tools on how to deal with their anxiety, develop a good speech, and deliver a powerful presentation. Good news is that within this coming hour, I'll try to cover at least the 5 really most important ones that I think you should be aware of if you are to speak publicly. Now, without further ado, I'd like to move on to the agenda for today. And as you can see, those 5 elements that I would like to cover are, number 1, how to fight stage fright. Number 2, how to influence your audience with your body language. Number 3, how to draw attention with your voice. Number 4, how to involve your audience in your speech. And frankly, number 5, how to tell stories that people remember. Now, let's get started. So the point number 1, how to fight stage fright. Now, frankly, if you've ever made a speech, and it doesn't matter whether it was at a birthday party, in a team meeting, in front of a large group of people who are your neighbors or community members, you probably have experienced some kind of discomfort. And it may have been, a dry throat, shaky hands or knees. You could go sweaty. You could actually, you could blush. So all of these are common signs of what is often referred to as stage fright. Now, why do we actually fear public speaking? What is it in this act that actually sends sort of chills down our spine? Well, researchers and public speaking specialists alike like to call this a spotlight syndrome, or as I referred to it before, a stage fright. Basically, when we are out there on the stage, doesn't matter if it's a real stage or just a room full of people looking at us, we think that people are actually analyzing us. And that is very discomforting. Trouble is that we believe that people are actually looking for our mistakes. Now, the truth is, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, the truth is that most people do not do that. And most people are actually quite genuinely listening and want to receive good information. The trouble is that we get caught up in a downward spiral of negativity when one thought, one bad thought, actually creates another. So let me show you how this negative spiral works. Or in fact, tell you that So the most important thing, I mean, before we talk about the spiral of negativity, the most important thing is to realize that all of that fear, all of that negativity is nothing but the product of our brain. And here's how it works. So imagine there's a situation, probably a very familiar situation to a lot of people. So you made a little speech, you made a short speech or a presentation, and somebody in the audience says something like, oh, good, can we go home now? Or something of that kind. So that comment, that feedback from the audience, creates a thought in your brain, a thought of kind like, he didn't like my talk. Then if you follow my slide, you can see that that thought creates a feeling, and you basically feel bad about it. Now, it doesn't stop there. That bad feeling causes you to come up with a second thought, which is even more general, such as, nobody liked my talk, and you feel worse. Now, when you feel worse, a third thought can actually cross your mind, and that would be something like, I should never speak again. That was terrible. And you're feeling, well, I want to cry. So, now, out of all of these things I've just mentioned, and you actually see on your screen right now, ask yourself a question. What has indeed happened? What out of this is actual reality? Well, guess what? The only real thing is the situation. That is, someone indeed say, oh, good, we can go home now. But everything in the red quadrangle is nothing but the product of your brain, what I often refer to as the spiral of negativity. So basically, what you should do is you should train your brain to stop that line of thought the moment you feel that you go along this downward negative spiral. So whenever you think like you want to make a thought comes to your mind like, oh, he didn't like my talk because he made that comment, or she didn't like my talk because she looked at her watch, just tell herself, well, this is nothing but a product of my brain, and I won't let my brain to take over me, so I'm not going to comment on it. In other words, imagine that actually that person who said, oh, good, we can go home now, he didn't really react to your talk. He just reacted to a fact that he needs to be home because maybe he needs to attend to a child who is sick at home and he needs to, being taken care of, or he has a very important meeting to attend and he just needs to rush out of the room. That has nothing to do in terms of facts, hard facts, nothing to do with the quality of your presentation. Unfortunately, we just tend to create this monster in our brain and then literally be afraid of that monster and run away from it. So train your brain to stop that line of thinking, that sabotage. Now, what can you actually do in terms of fighting your fear? Now, I'm going to give you a couple of specific recommendations which will hopefully help you fight your anxiety both before the speech and during the speech. Now, before the speech, a couple of things which you absolutely must take care of if you are to make an important presentation. Number one, know your topic. And I don't mean this just as a cliche word. What it really gives you, the knowledge of the topic gives you the confidence that will boost your performance, will make you look and sound much better, much more confident, much more ready than otherwise. So knowing the topic really means is at least read your bullet points or actually jot down a few thoughts on a piece of paper just to make sure that you know the beginning, the middle, and the end of your presentation. Number two, practice. Now, practice makes perfect. We all know that. But in reality, a lot of people who I've coached so far, the company executives, public figures, they have a bad habit of just coming to an event with a speech in their hands, which most likely was written by someone else, and they've never even read it. Now, that is totally unacceptable. Of course, you'll do a very bad performance if you haven't practiced. So my recommendation is take your smartphone, put it into a recording mode, and literally speak, maybe even read for the first time, but then try to literally go over your speech and record it onto your smartphone. And then listen to that recording later on. Listen to how your voice sounds, how well do you actually keep the pace, how well your pronunciation is. So listening to yourself on the phone is a really powerful tool. I had a lot of people who actually learned a lot of things and could spot their mistakes just by listening to them. Number 3, rest and exercise. If you really have an important event coming, say tomorrow, make sure you have a good night's sleep before. And again, this is not just something of a nice to do kind. It's really important for you to recover, to be energetic, to have a good night's sleep, and then wake up in the morning refreshed. In the morning, if you can, do a short exercise, and a small aerobic exercise will do. You can, jog or just do some stretching, whatever it is that is required to get your blood running and making sure that your brain works well. Right before the speech, when you're in the audience and you know that in a few moments you'll be asked to actually get up and talk, sit down. If you can't sit down, sit down. If you can't, just try to close your eyes if it's possible, if it's acceptable in that area, if in that audience. Take a few slow, deep breaths. That event, that just doing that, just slowly breathing a couple of times will actually bring down your nerves, calm you down, and make you much readier to give a more solid and solemn speech. So do this before the talk. Now, imagine that you're on the stage. So what do you do now? Well, number 1 advice I have for a lot of people is start the speech in a loud and confident voice. The way you start the speech sets the tone. If you started kind of mumbling and saying things like, hi guys, I'm really glad to be here, and well, let me see, so don't. You're there, people are looking at you, you have about 30 seconds to a minute to grab their attention. So what you really have to do is look sharp and sound sharp. So you can say something like, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rashad Bayramov, and I'm going to talk to you today about the 5 secrets of public speaking. So something of the sort, making sure you sound loud, confident, and clear. That will grab the attention of the audience. That will get them listening to you immediately. Number 2, do not ever look at a crowd. Look at a specific person. You know what we're really afraid of? We're really afraid of a crowd of people, those dozens of eyes targeted at us. But when you actually isolate out of that crowd one nice, familiar, smiley, fun face to look at, just a face that will comfort you, that's enough for a good start. So instead of looking at everywhere, like darkening your eyes from one person to another, pick a person and establish an eye contact with that person. And the only way, and again, it could be just somebody you know, or somebody with, as I said, a nice, smiling, positive face. That will boost your confidence. That will make your speech, that beginning of the speech, which is usually the most difficult part, much smoother. Number 3, focus on the message, not on your anxieties. A lot of the time, people are just worried, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Will I do it? Will I not do it? I wish it was over already. So you're just focusing on your anxieties. But you really forget the reason you get up on that stage. And the reason you get up on that stage is to deliver a message. So imagine this scenario. Imagine you're working in a theater. You work in a theater, but you're not an actor. You're just somebody who helps the crew with props. Now imagine that just a few moments before the performance begins, a fire starts behind the curtains. You're the first person to spot the fire. Now, you know that in a few moments, that fire can actually cause a big and huge trouble to everybody in the audience. You're the first person to notice it, but you're kind of shy. You're not the kind of person to go on the stage and, do a performance. You're just a guy who works in a theater, but you're not an actor. Will you really have a second thought before deciding to jump on the stage and say, fire, fire, get out of here, or whatever the message you want to send to the audience? The chances are that moment you would not be worried about your anxieties or how the audience will feel about you. Will they accept you? Will they like you? You will just say, hey, this is way more important than any anxiety, and I just need to step out there and deliver the key message. So think about every speech you make is that important for you. It's almost like delivering the message of, hey, this is as important as if a fire was going on and I would just warn you about it. Think about it as fire. Think about it as breaking news. That will make you focus on the message, not on your anxieties. And generally, don't apologize. A lot of people have a tendency, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late, I'm sorry, I forgot that, I'm sorry, I can't find that. This constant line of apologies simply takes away from your message and does not help anyone in the audience to focus on what you really say. And remember one big truth, and that's just a fun slide for you to look at. And the one big truth is the audience doesn't generally care. A lot of times people are there for many reasons, and not always all of them are just listening to you attentively, trying to decipher every word you're trying to say. A lot of people just have tons of thoughts on the back of their brain, from having a short break to, what am I going to buy as a gift to my kid, or I'm hungry, or I want to go to the restroom, and many other thoughts. So just do not worry and do it. Go out there and do your thing. Now we've covered the first key issue, the first key advice on how to deal with your anxieties. Let me go to the second piece. That is how to influence people, how to influence the audience with the body language. Now, a lot of you must have heard about the fact or research saying that body language actually plays a huge role in delivering your message. And some say it's even more important than words, and some argue that that's not correct. That doesn't matter. The thing is that I'm not trying to play with figures here and say that body language is more important than words or less important than words. What I'm trying to say here is body language is important. Full stop. Now, how can I prove that? Well, let's actually take a look at just a couple of photographs here. And these are just some photos that I've pulled out of the World Wide Web. And by looking at these photographs, and I guess some of the people on the screen are very familiar to you. President Clinton, President Bush, Vladimir Putin, and then the gentleman on the bottom right corner is former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi. Now, just look at these faces for a moment. What do you understand looking at these faces? Can you actually guess what they're talking about or what they're going to talk about? Can you guess by their reaction, by their mimic, by their facial gestures, by their hands, by the way they sort of bend their head, what they want to say? Now, chances are you'll be probably thrown in a lot of different scenarios, and you can say, for example, Bill Clinton is trying to calm down the crowd, or George Bush is just puzzled by somebody's question, or Vladimir Putin is just, giving a sort of a cold look to someone who is not, delivering a good speech, or Silvio Berlusconi is doing something else. The truth is that I have no idea what's happening on the screen. I have no idea what these people are talking about. But the truth is that even without a single word, just a snapshot of a person's face, his posture, his gestures, gives you a lot of food for thought, a lot of ideas of what he can be talking about. Well, imagine now delivering a presentation. What happens if you use your hands, if you use your gestures, your facial expressions, your movements? Those carry a lot of meaning. So you can't just say, I'm going to focus on words and the language will just take care of itself. You should really think about both. So what kind of advice can I give you? Some practical advice. Now, again, just for the sake of clarity, I've split up the screen into two parts, saying, calling it a positive and negative body language. Surely there is no such a thing as a positive or a negative body language in science or in research. It's just what I use to make my point easy to understand. When I refer to positive body language, I'm talking about the body language that helps you enhance your message. Negative body language, on the contrary, takes away from your message. So, what are some things that you can do to enhance your message? Well, number one, smile. It's a universal tool, and I've been to many countries with my public speaking trainings and speeches. I've been to countries as diverse as Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine, India, Bulgaria, Georgia, and different other countries. And in all of these countries, whenever you smile, you tend to build a fantastic bridge to the hearts of people. And you really warm up to them, and they warm up to you. So just a simple act of smiling while you deliver your first words of your presentation can actually break ice and make you feel comfortable and draw attention of the audience. Now, open hands. Now, generally, whenever you talk, develop a habit of using your hands to make a point. Ideally, your hands should be open. They shouldn't be locked on your chest. They shouldn't be behind your back. Just use your hands to underline certain points, to point out certain things on the screen or people in the audience. Just generally try to use your hands to animate your presentation. Nodding. If somebody says something in the audience gives your feedback on your comment or on your words, just a simple act of nodding will actually help the audience feel that you're listening to them. Eye contact, a very obvious one, and eye contact is a classic. Whenever you build eye contact with people, you actually literally build a bridge to their hearts. And eye contact should not be mixed up with just scanning the audience. I'm not talking about looking this way and that every second. I'm talking about choosing the person and focusing on that person, establishing an eye contact with him, and talking to him or her for a few seconds, for 5 seconds or 6 seconds or 10 seconds. Probably that's about enough. Making sure you get some positive feedback from that person. So whenever he or she nods at you or smiles at you or maybe even leans forward, that's a sign that there is a connection. That's a sign that there is a click. And that's a time when you can actually move to the next person. Standing straight and facing people. One of my favorite authors, Amy Cuddy, in her famous speech at TED.com, mentioned about a posture which she referred to as the ultimate confidence building posture. And that's a posture which she recommends to all people who experience lack of confidence as speakers to use to literally build up the confidence on the go. So she mentions this posture as literally standing straight with your feet sort of firmly grounded on the floor, with your back straight, with your head sort of chin up, looking straight in front of you, and using your hands with the hands in front of you, and just keeping that posture for a minute and a half or a minute works wonders. Well, what actually happens is that your body sends a signal to your brain and says to your brain, hey, everything is cool. I'm okay. I'm confident, because that's a confident posture. Now, your brain gets literally fooled by your body signal and actually believes that it's reality and sends another signal back to your body saying, yes, you do feel confident, or you feel confident. And that creates a constant positive sort of affirmation loop when your body and your brain send each other a signal of, I'm cool, I'm confident, I'm okay. And that actually can help you literally help that lack of confidence fade away and be replaced with the necessary confidence for your speech. Walking slowly. I know a lot of people have a tendency to walk on the stage and they say that kind of help them to calm down their nervousness. But the truth is that you can't just walk nervously. There has to be some intent in your walk. And my recommendation is always, if you really want to walk, do it this way. So, for example, you want to walk from the left side to the right side. Count your steps, something like 1, 2, 3, stop, and then turn your body and look at the audience. And then if you want to make another move, say a minute later or 2 minutes later, again, turn left, count to 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. When you make a third step, stop, turn around, look at the audience. That shows you're confident, you know what you're doing, and you're pacing yourself as opposed to just desperately fidgeting around and trying to find yourself a comfortable place. Now, what are some of the examples of negative body language? Obviously, some of these are just the opposite of what I've said. So avoiding eye contact. When you're shy, when you haven't prepared your speech well, you can have a predisposition to kind of look either at your notes all the time or look at the screen all the time, and that takes away from a very important thing, establishing eye contact, and that's paramount. That's absolutely important for you in order to build rapport with the audience. Turning away, similarly, a lot of people who present slide packs, they have a tendency to look at the slides all the time, and turning your back on the audience is not a good idea because they want to listen to you. They came to look at you and listen to you, not to have you read the slides or look at the screen. Crossing your arms on your chest, kind of another classic, make you look defensive and sometimes a bit arrogant. Not standing straight. A lot of people have a tendency to shift their body weight from one foot to another, and that just doesn't create the right image, and you look kind of shifty, you look worried, and you look unprepared, and again, it takes away from your message. So, having said that, I want to move on to topic number 3, and so far we've covered the first issue on how to fight the stage fright, how to deal with your anxieties. We also talked about body language and why it's important, and and I've shared some specific tips with you on what you can do in terms of your body movements, your hand gestures, and your body posture to look confident and to draw the attention of the audience. Now let's spend some time and talk about the voice. Now, obviously, there are 3 channels through which any speaker delivers his message or her message. It's the words, it's the body language, and it's the voice. So, the voice is the medium which adds sincerity, adds confidence, adds reassurance, adds professionalism, and many other things, many other important, essential elements to make your speech a success. So if your voice is shaky, if your voice does not sound loud enough, clear enough, you unfortunately give an impression, create an impression of a person who either doesn't know what he or she's talking about, or not well prepared, or just simply doesn't care. Neither of these scenarios is good for a person who wants to deliver an impressive speech. So what can you do? What are some of the common pitfalls that you need to avoid? Now, let me go over some of the classic ones. The problem with monotony. Monotony is what I always talk to my clients about. And it's something that I see a lot of people experiencing difficulty with. A lot of people say, well, it's just my voice. It's just the way I talk. It's just the way I am. What's the problem with having just a regular voice? I can't change my voice. And whatever other excuses you can think of. So the trouble is that you really need to understand the physiology behind why monotonous voice is bad for a speaker. Now, remember that our brain is a very curious beast, and our brains are constantly scanning the environment for what's happening. They're scanning the environment for, of course, as you may guess, for the signs of danger, and that's been something that our ancestors, passed on through DNA from generation to generation. The brain is always scanning the environment to understand if there's any danger in the environment. So when the brain scans the environment, and say your brain of a listener in an audience scans the environment and hears a speaker for a few moments, for a minute, for half a minute, for a couple of minutes, your brain kind of tries to understand what's going on. And even if the voice is monotonous, you kind of, you can live with it. You can wait. You can still focus your attention on that speaker, even if the voice is monotonous for a couple of minutes. Trouble is that after some time, the brain literally goes on standby or even shuts down and says, I don't think there's anything happening right now because I don't see any changes in the environment that are worthy of my attention. So I'd rather put my limited resources to a better use. In other words, monotony is like, what I often refer to jokingly is a dead man's cardiogram. When you watch movies and you see somebody dying on a, in hospital, and you look at the screen and it just goes beep and it's a straight line. Well, that's how monotonous voice sounds like. It just you will never be able to draw attention of the audience for a long time or keep the attention of the audience if your voice is monotonous. So, it's not about you, not about me, not about the audience. It's not about somebody being not attentive. It's the physiology. You need to understand that you really need to change the voice while you speak. You need to bring in emphasis. You need to underline words. You need to do things that will actually draw attention of the audience. So some of the things that you can do is using emphasis. Now, this is something very easy, and anybody can do it. Literally, what it means is that imagine you actually preparing a speech, and you've written down a couple of notes, or you have some bullet points. Take a piece of paper, take your bullet points, have your pen ready, and simply underline one or two words that you think are important in that particular sentence or in that particular paragraph. And that underlining means to you need to emphasize the word. So next time you speak, instead of saying, our sales figures have changed from last quarter and now we are 30% better than we were in last year or something like that, go ahead and say, our sales figures have changed and now we actually going 30% over the previous year. So just underline the word 30% or underline some other word, whatever the word that you feel is important to deliver the message. And how do you do that? You literally just underline that word on your piece of paper that you will take with you, or your notes, or your laptop, or your iPad, whatever the prop that you may be using when you make a presentation. So using the emphasis will help you a lot when you need to draw the attention of the audience. Using the emphasis almost, send a signal to the brain of the audience. Listen to me. It's important. Listen to me. So you really need to do that. Now, another important thing is speaking clearly. Now, I've been working in a multinational company for the past 13 years. And certainly not all the people that I work with are either American or British. A lot of people are people of other nationalities, and for them, the English language is not the first language, and they really have a hard time sometimes understanding people who, speak the language, for them being the first language, kind of in a way which is a bit casual and full of idioms, or where they kind of eat their endings, etc. So, or use an accent, or the type of language which is very local for the area that person comes from. Be aware that in the growingly multinational world and in the growingly multinational work community, language, the clarity of language is very important. So when you make a speech, imagine that people who are listening to you, they are not the people who have the English language as their primary tongue, as their mother tongue. So target them, or think about your audience as those who will need a bit more clarity from you, as opposed to just your regular daily routine sort of casual conversation. So speaking clearly is important, and also that adds to your professionalism, and adds an air of professionalism, adds an air of importance and confidence to your speech, because speaking clearly certainly helps you draw the attention of the audience. The power of silence. Now, the power of silence is probably one of the most underused points in one of the most underused tools in public speaking. A lot of speakers shy away from it, and they feel uncomfortable about it, and they think, well, if I'm silent, what if the audience thinks that I just forgot my words, or I don't know what to say, or I'm not confident in fact. Well, the reality is that it's totally the other way around. If you actually use the power of silence professionally, if you do it well, you create an impression of a very confident, professional speaker. So how do you do that? When will be the right time to use the power of silence? So for me, there are two easy slots, or two easy ways, or two easy spots where you can use that. Number one is when you're just about to announce an important point. So before you make an important point, use the power of silence, and it could sound something like that. And now that we're speaking about the power of silence, let me make an important point. It is really important for you to use it when you speak in front of your employees. So basically, I made a second or 2-second pause before I made my important point. So when you make that little pause, you literally say to your audience, "Hey, wait a minute, it's coming now. It's important. Listen to me." That will have heads turning around and actually listening to you. A second time or second area where you can use it is when you've just made an important announcement or when you've just made an important point. It almost helps people digest what you've just said. So if you made an important point, such as use the power of silence, and then you make a pause, and then you allow your audience to internalize it, almost like say, aha, I understand. Because naturally, if you just move on with your speech, they will not have time to process this important piece of information. Okay? So, having said that, and before I move to point number 4, I'd like to pause and ask my moderator if there are any questions from the audience that I can answer.
Excellent. Thank you, Rashad. Some really good information. So one of our questions comes from Rebecca, and Rebecca would like to know, do note cards or index cards take away from positive body language in a presentation?
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Rebecca, for an excellent question. My general recommendation, I get this question a lot of time. I have a similar question from my clients saying, do I need to take my notes on stage, and is it okay if I read from my notes? Should I put them on a desk in front of me? Should I have it as a note card, etc.? So my general piece of advice is do whatever makes you feel comfortable on stage. That means that if you really can't do without notes, you should definitely take your notes with you. Now, in terms of whether they take away from the message, whether they take away from your ability to use your body language. Now, I understand that if one hand is busy with sort of holding your notes, that means that probably that hand won't be used very much. However, what I suggest is even if you have notes, say you keep them in your left hand, still try to free your right hand to be able to gesture, to underline, to almost to punctuate your speech with your right hand. So that would be a good way to do that. But by all means, if the note cards are important for you because you have a tendency to forget, say, your line of thought, or you have a tendency to forget the sequence of your bullet points, do not be afraid of it. It's absolutely acceptable. I've seen top-level executives, I've actually coached CEOs who use index cards, who use note cards. My only little advice is make them as small as possible. Usually it's kind of A5 format, maybe a little smaller than that. And of course, staple them together so they don't fall off your hands accidentally, and you don't lose the sequence. But that's absolutely acceptable and not a problem. Okay, I hope that helps answer your question. If there's any other question, Erin, I'll be happy to answer. If not, we'll just continue with the presentation.
I think we can continue and hold a few off until the end.
Very good. Thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to item number 4 or secret number 4, and that is involving your audience in your speech. It is really very, very important that your audience feels part of the speech. In fact, this is probably one of the biggest reasons people are bored during speeches and presentations and conferences, is that they do not feel involved. They feel like somebody is simply throwing information at them as opposed to speaking to them, speaking with them. So it's important if you want to make an impression, a good impression, if you want your audience to understand you, if you want your audience on board, you really need to involve your audience in your speech. Now, how can you do that? There are a couple of practical pieces of advice that I can share with you. Well, number one, plan an interactive opening using questions. Some of the best speeches I've ever heard started with a question. And it could be a very specific question, something to which you actually expect the audience to answer you, give you some, maybe shout out some answers from the audience. Or it could be a rhetorical question, just enough to get people thinking about the topic of your presentation. Either way, starting off, opening with a question is a powerful way to kickstart your conversation, to kickstart your presentation, and immediately hook your people, immediately get them involved, get them engaged, get them thinking about the topic. Now, assuming that you've done your interactive opening, how about the rest of your speech? Absolutely. Plant a couple of questions throughout your speech. Plant a couple of questions where you can say, somewhere in the middle, something like, now that we've come to this point, do you think that will be acceptable? Do you think that sounds about right? Or do you think that would be a good approach? Whatever is relevant, whatever is important, whatever feels appropriate to you at that moment. Plant those questions throughout the speech, almost like milestones where you wake your audience up, even if you've lost them for a few moments. What else can you do? Ask for a show of hands. That's something that I use a lot of times. You walk into an audience and you don't know people and you just want to break the ice. Sometimes you just say, okay, guys, it's a pleasure to meet you. Before I start this, may I ask you, if you're all from University X or University Z, and people just show their hands. Yes, we're from University X or from University. Oh, are all of you students here? Please, if you're a student, raise your hand. Or if you're, who is professor? Please raise your hand. Something of the sort where you simply have some kind of engagement by show of hands or standing up, where you move your audience, where you shake your audience, where you get the people involved into your presentation. You can actually ask listeners to guess certain facts. Now, that's my favorite. A lot of times I have business presentations, and in the middle of my business presentation, instead of just showing them the numbers, I say something like, our greenhouse emissions have improved dramatically. If last year we had a figure of, say, 1 million tons, this year the figure has improved. So before I show this figure to you, what would be your guess? And let people guess. Let people throw some ideas. And, you can just reassure them. You can say, okay, good, sounds about right, or you're higher or lower, or that's warmer. Just a few seconds of engagement and people will feel naturally in a mood to kind of play the game, to go along with you. And then, a few seconds later, you can say, okay, I'm not gonna keep this a secret for you. The figure is, and you just flip the screen. You just click on the screen and click on your presentation, and the screen flashes up, and you have the right number on the screen. Now, that actually reaches two targets. Number one, you engage your audience. Number two, people will have a better memory. They actually will remember that figure better simply because you've engaged them in a conversation before you show up that figure. Ask audience to provide examples from their real life. There's a lot of people in the audience who will have sympathy. They will have similar experience. Do not shy away from asking people something like, I'm sure that somebody in the audience have experienced something similar. Anybody volunteering to give your own examples? Anybody heard something similar before? Anybody did something similar before? Wait for a show of hands. I'm sure somebody will raise a hand and say, yes, I've had something similar happening to me before. Having endorsement from your audience will actually improve your chances of getting heard, getting understood, getting believed in. Because somebody in the audience confirming what you just said is way more powerful than just you talking. Allow some humor. Well, that's very obvious. That works perfectly as an icebreaker. It works perfectly as a way to establish candor, show sincerity, and build rapport with your audience. Finally, if anyone from the audience tells you something interesting, in fact, just gives you feedback, always honor their feedback. Always give them quality, quality reaction. Say something like, "Thank you, that was a great question," or "Oh, Erin, thank you very much. That was a fantastic comment," or "That comment added a lot of value to our conversation." Make sure they feel appreciated. If you do that, trust me, you will win your audience over very soon. There'll be more people wanting to talk. There'll be more people willing to raise their hands. There'll be more people nodding their heads. There'll be more people participating. Now, now we're going to talk shortly about the importance of telling stories and what actually makes stories important. Why do we always talk about you need to tell a story that people will remember? Well, the truth is that a good story is a great way to inspire people. A good story is a great way to teach people. A good story is a great way to help people remember the key message of your presentation. So, what makes a good story a good story? Well, on the screen I put down 4 elements that, in my view, are paramount to making a great story. Number 1, emotions. Whenever you tell a story, unless that story carries an emotional weight, it will not be understood, or it will not be accepted wholeheartedly by your audience. So ask yourself before you tell your story, does my story touch people's hearts? Number 2, a simple plot. Whenever you tell a story, check if it's understandable. I mean, a good sense check is, will your son, will your daughter, will your teenage kid understand your speech, understand that story? Number 3, dramatic tension. There has to be something in your story, almost like in a suspense, thriller, a point at which, the audience wants to, they sit on the edge of their chair and they kind of, lean forward and say, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I want to know what's going to happen next." You need to build that tension in your story. And number 4, you need to add memorable details. The name of a person, the color of the car, the depths of the river, the price of the coffee you bought in a coffee shop. Whatever the details of your story are, you need to build details. These details are actually hooks, which your audience will use later on to literally climb the tree of that story, climb the tree and be able to recollect the story you've told. So next time you tell a story, try to sort of check if your story follows some of these guidelines. Does it touch people's hearts? Is there emotional weight in it? Is its plot simple enough to be understood by a kid? Is there a dramatic tension in it? And does it have memorable details? Okay, that pretty much brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. And before I hand over to Erin for the questions, I'm just going to go over very quickly of the 5 secrets or points that I've raised in this webinar today. Number 1, the stage fright. So what you really need to remember is that stage fright is a normal condition. A lot of people experience it. A lot of people have this. What you need to remember is that most of the time it's just a product of your brain. There is nothing happening in the real life. All you need to do is recognize that the moment that spiral of negativity happens, just say to yourself, it's just a product of my brain. People do not have bad feedback. They do not send me bad feedback. I just need to focus on my message. I need to take slow breaths and understand that the key reason I'm here is to deliver the message. Number 2, body language. Absolutely. Do not forget that the message delivered to the audience through the words, through the body language, and through the voice. So use all 3 channels at least equally. So make sure you use your hands, your body is straight up, it shows your confidence. Make sure that your voice is clear, that you're loud enough for the audience, you use emphasis in your speech, you underline the right words, and you use the power of silence to emphasize the key points, to let the audience digest what you just said. Number 4, involve the audience in your speech if you want them not to be bored, if you want them to be on board, if you want them to follow your advice. And finally, implant stories into your speech. And if you want the story to be memorable, make sure it has an emotional weight, make sure it is understood, it has a simple plot, make sure it has memorable details which people will recollect later on and use them as signposts, as hooks to climb that mountain of the message, and make sure that there is a suspense built into your story. Having said that, I'd like to just use my final minutes to propose something to you. And I've been doing these seminars and trainings all over the world and in my home country with different kinds of audience. And I know one thing for sure, that there are 2 types of people leaving this kind of events. Number 1, people say, well, that was an interesting event, interesting seminar, interesting training. I heard some interesting things. I'll try to use them, and thank you very much. And they're gone. And usually there isn't much commitment and there isn't much follow-up. For these people, it was frankly and unfortunately a waste of time. But there's a second group of people, and those people think, okay, wait a minute. I've actually spent 1 hour of my time listening to this story, to this presentation, to this seminar. So how can I make sure I actually change my life for the better through the things that I've heard? And that is what I recommend you do, what I ask you to do, what I encourage you to do. Pick one thing right now, right this very moment. Have a piece of paper in front of you, take your phone, and take a few seconds and write down, literally right now, one thing you heard on this webinar that you can take and use literally tomorrow or even today to make your speeches, to make your presentations better, more powerful, more memorable, more impactful. If you just do that, add me, and you actually see on the screen now some of my Facebook and Instagram account details. You can add me on Facebook, and my profile is open and public, so I add people who are usually participants of my seminar. And the reason I say to you, add me on the Facebook and send me a private message, or you can actually make a public Facebook post where you commit to doing something about your presentation style that will augment it, that will enhance it. And it can sound something like, today I attended a webinar and I learned a few things, and I commit or I promise that from tomorrow I'll be paying attention to complete the sentence, to my voice, or I'll use a power of silence, or I'll use something else. And that will be your public commitment. And trust me, if you make a public commitment today, do not postpone it, do not do it tomorrow, do it right now. If you make a public commitment today, add me on the Facebook, send me a message, or just make a public post and add me or tag me. That will increase your chance of actually following through on this. Having said that, thank you very much for your attention. It's been a great pleasure. And over to you, Erin, if we have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Rashad. Some really good content there. We do have several questions. We had quite a few come in at the end, so if we're not able to get to them all, we will send them through our email address to be answered at a later time. But our first question comes from David, and he would like to go back to the piece of your presentation of including the audience. So David will be presenting in December, and he's wondering how he can control conversation in the audience during a speech that he's giving.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin. Thank you, David, for an excellent question. And interacting with the audience is a tricky thing. And I understand that if you do not control the flow of your speech, it may easily, go on a tangent and, frankly, steal your time, your precious time. So my general recommendation is whenever you want to involve your audience, make sure you actually control the length of an answer or the length of the feedback. So, for example, if you ask a question to the audience and say, okay, anybody here has a comment to make, or does that sound familiar? Could you please raise your hands and confirm if you've done this and that? And if you see people sort of raising their hands and providing the feedback, if you feel that they go over, say, in my view, more than 20 or 30 seconds or, close to a minute, I would just literally gently but firmly stop them and say maybe something along the lines, Great, David. I see some great content here, but just aware of the time right now. So may I ask you to summarize your key point or get to the question or get to your key point. It may sound to you a bit abrasive or a bit harsh, but trust me, that's if it's done correctly, if it's done politely, and as I said, politely but firmly, that will usually bring people down sort of to an expected norm of giving you the answer, giving you the point. If you have a show of hands, it's very easy. You've got your voting points. Just say, thank you very much. I see like half of the audience agrees or 75% of the audience agrees, 25% disagrees. So give some summary. Make sure you feed back to the audience. And absolutely make sure you compliment people on their feedback. Something like, David, great answer, or fantastic feedback. What I really like about David's feedback is add your valuable comment. Make sure he or she feels appreciated. I hope that answers the question. And Erin, over to you if we have more questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rashad. So our next question comes from another alum, and he is looking. I apologize. I apologize. He's making a speech, and he says that he has made quite a few speeches, many of which have been at RIT quite a bit ago. However, he's having some trouble making extempore speeches, and he's wondering if you can give him some pointers. And I think that surmises his question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Erin. And a great question. I do have a separate training seminar, which is entitled "How to Make a Great Speech in 3 Minutes." So my general line of advice, if you're sort of asked out of the blue sky by someone literally within a few minutes back, okay, George, I'd like you to come over now, and in 5 minutes I have this event happening, and I'd like you to say a few welcoming remarks, say a few words to the audience. My recommendation is, number one, do not panic. Now, I realize that it sounds as a cliche answer, but it's really important that you do not panic. Number two, you need to understand, or at least you need to ask a question to the person who gives you that opportunity to do this extemporaneous speech. What's the key message that person or the event organizer wants to deliver? So you need to make sure that even whatever happens, even if your speech is just 1 minute or 2 minutes, you plant that key message in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of your presentation. So, in my view, it should be built around the classic 3 elements of any good speech. You have to have an intro, you have to have the body, and you have to have a conclusion. So basically, the intro should sound along the lines of, the usual welcome and announcement of the importance of topic X or topic Z to the audience, to you, to the organizers. Then, hopefully, if you had, say, a couple of minutes to prepare for this, you can just name 1 or 2 arguments or 1 or 2 facts, ideally coming from your life, that stipulate, that confirm the importance of the topic. And again, I know that it may sound vague to you right now, but since the topics could be different, you can literally just go back into your memory and think of 1 or 2 things that support the importance of the speech, of that event, of that presentation, and just loudly say this. Okay, and I think that and I can easily see at least 2 reasons for the importance of today. The reason number 1, and then you just say it. Reason number 2, just say it. Refer to your previous experience, your life experience, because it's easier to summon that knowledge from your memory as opposed to prepare an eloquent speech or eloquent remark. And number 3, when you make a conclusion, literally just repeat what you said. Underline the importance of the event, underline the importance of that presentation, and just wish everybody luck or wish everybody a great time, and say you'll be watching out, or you'll be looking for great comments. Again, I know it's very quick, and I've tried to give you a snapshot of it, but I'll be happy to have an offline conversation with you if Erin shares my contact details with you. Please feel free to send me an email, and I'll be able to send you some stuff over. Erin, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rashad. And we have many more excellent questions we will not be able to get to. However, we will be sending additional questions to our email, ratalum@rit.edu. You can also tweet us at RIT Alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinar, and we'll direct your questions to the panel. And as you can see, Rashad's information is also up on the screen. Some great questions and some requests to have this recording as well. So thank you for your time, Rashad.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our listeners for joining us today as well. Please consider joining us on Wednesday, October 18th for our next RIT webinar with Tori Robinson, graduation year 2012, and she's from RIT's Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships. And will be joining us to speak on how to break down financial aid and what and how you can find out the right plan for you and your child as you apply to colleges. Thank you again for joining us. Please exit this webinar by simply closing your WebEx window, and please do let us know what you thought of today's webinar through a brief survey, which will pop up when you exit. Have a great day.